Good afternoon. So indeed, I'm switching to English. So I'm Charles-Edouard Monier from RTL Netherlands. I'm working at RTL Group for 7 years and 3.5 years now in the Netherlands, where I am responsible for business planning and insights. That's my initial scope. And on top of, from now 2 years, I'm responsible for the sustainability track, so coordinating our efforts to reduce our carbon footprint and to address this topic all along our value chain. So let's start with some context. Why did we start to act in 2020, sorry. It was actually 2 years ago, just before COVID. Before that, we were very blind about our carbon footprint. And we started to act because of, as you can see, multiple reasons. It's a combination of factors. It was a special momentum, let's say. On one side, more and more citizens, our users, our fans, definitely are more willing to have to use green products and to see change in that directions. Definitely also our clients, brands, and advertisers are more and more also moving to green products, and they are asking, what are you guys doing? How can we collaborate on that? Employees, it's also a key factor. We saw that our employees are definitely looking for a company, for a work environment which is sustainable. It's a key factor, especially when we are in this war for talent environment. It's important to have a company which is committed to sustainability, and definitely also authorities and regulations around us are pushing us to act. We have more and more reports to do. For example, from 2023, we'll have to do the EU taxonomy, so to report all our investment regarding sustainability and market and competition. So we saw that more and more in the Netherlands, but everywhere else, in the US, in the UK, the industry is moving. So we said, okay, we also have to start acting. On the right, you see the general framework, the approach, and the goal that we have. So basics, it's that we have three steps, three key phases that we follow. The first one, it's a recurring phase, it's the measurement. So every year now, since 2020, we are doing carbon footprint. We have just finalized the third carbon footprint audit, covering the three scopes, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So I don't know if everyone is familiar with this standard methodology of scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Scope 1, it's all your direct emissions coming from energy. Scope 2 is the indirect emissions, CO2 emissions coming from your energy that you purchase. And scope 3, it's all the other type of emissions coming all along your value chain, coming from your partners. And in our case, and in the case of many media companies, what the main learning was that 95% of our footprint, 95% of our CO2 emissions are coming from our partners, are in the scope 3 emissions, meaning that if we want to achieve carbon neutrality, which is the goal that we have by 2030, we have to align, we have to work together, we have to collaborate with the industry and to find methodologies, to find processes, to find a more efficient workflow altogether. Phase 2, it's all the reductions that we can work on, the action plan, but of course we have to have insights, to have figures, to drive and to steer those action plan. That's why the focus is on content now, because you will see that this is our key chunk of emission. And the phase 3 is the compensation, so carbon offsetting. When you go to the market and you buy carbon credits by, for example, investing in a reforestation project, that's what we do in Brazil. But we do this phase 3 only when we start acting on the reduction plan in order to be legit, credible, and avoid any greenwashing. So we started very pragmatically on this compensation phase. I will tell you more about it, what we did. Please feel free if you have any question on the fly. Otherwise, we can discuss that later on during the lunch. Here you see an overview of our estimated plan towards carbon neutrality 2030. That's the end goal, the deadline set by Bertelsmann and RTL Group, our mother company. If we can achieve that before 2030, that would be great. You see the result. 2019 was our first carbon footprint audit. And you see the big buckets: content production, advertising technology, and the commute of our employees. So all those three buckets are part of Scope 3. We are not directly dealing with the sources of energy behind advertising technology, content production, and the commute, except for the production that we do in-house in our own buildings, but otherwise it's with external producers. 2020 with COVID, the pink bucket decreased a lot, of course, with the working from home situation due to the pandemic. And what you don't see here is that in 2021, the orange bucket, advertising technology, went down to almost zero because we moved to a different ad server, which is running only on green energy. So we already, this 27% bucket is now almost at zero. There is always few unavoidable emissions, but it's almost zero. So the big bucket that we have now, the low-hanging fruit, where we know we have to focus on, is the content side, the content production. And you see that step by step in 2025 and by 2030, we will reach carbon neutrality. And you see this dotted black line, it's the carbon compensation. As I said, step by step, we will start to compensate where it's legit to do it.
And you missed 7%? Where is it?
The?
7% you miss total? Is that something else? Or what is it?
Those are the small colors on top of the 3%.
Yeah, you have other, yeah.
You don't see the percent.
No, I just put the big buckets. Other stuff, you have energy in our building, water management, paper, waste management, accommodations, and flights for the business travel, stuff like that. And all the cloud-based services, the tech services that we used, it's a lot of energy used, but the carbon footprint is very low because most of the vendors we work with, AWS, Azure, whatever, are running on green energy or are compensating. So the carbon impact of the tech part is very low, except for the advertising technology, which was big, but it's now almost zero because we moved to a green-based ad server. For the last 2 years, I think we have achieved quite some first good steps, trying to touch all our business units. I will focus on content and ad alliance, but you see that on the B2C side, we worked with Bayernradar. They are now investing in planting trees for each new paid subscriber. On the facility side, we decided to move only to electric vehicles for the leased car we have. We moved to only LED lights. I think we have 80% of LED lights in the building. We improved the water management systems also in the building. On the tech side, what we did is to work with our vendors to ask them transparent report, transparent data, what they are doing so we can report those data and work together. And on communication and employees, we started a guild, so a kind of community of interest, kind of ambassadors internally so we can touch different business units and move on pragmatically, not in a top-down approach with different teams at RTL. We started also to do some communication externally and internally to tell more what we are doing. So first, quick focus on Ad Alliance, and then the main focus on content. What we did in 2021, it's working on a project that we call the Green GRP, which is basically, it's GRP, but actually it's touching not only the linear domain, but also the digital advertising domain. The goal was to end up with a carbon neutral sales ecosystem. So you see what we took into account in the green frame, what is in scope and what is not in scope. So we measured all the emissions related to the value chain of Ad Alliance, including what you see related to employees and site, so energy emissions from the building of Ad Alliance here, very close by, lighting, heating, cooling, IT devices, so all the materials, phones, laptops that people are using, business travel, and the commute of our employees. And then below, all the services used all along the value chain, from the very first moment we discuss with an advertiser to the very end moment when we send the invoice and we do some reporting. So we measured the carbon footprint of all those services. You see some names: Salesforce, BCE, SAP. As I said, we moved from one dirty ad server to a green one. So thanks to that, the big chunk of emissions we had was all already reduced to zero. And we ended up with a remaining volume of ton of CO2, not very big, what we call the unavoidable emissions, for which we compensated. We did our first, for the first time, we bought some carbon credits via our mother company, Bertelsmann, who invested in a reforestation project in Brazil. So we have access via them to easily to carbon credits. So we reduced as much as possible. We measured, we reduced as much as possible, and we ended up compensating with those carbon credits. So since January 1st, at Alliance, the whole sales ecosystem is carbon neutral. That was one of the first concrete projects that we worked on with the sales team. What is not in scope on the left, on the right, what we didn't take into account is the CO2 emissions coming from the production of the creative themselves. It's not part of our own scope. And the energy and devices used by the end users when they watch ads. I can discuss this part later on at the end, because I think you have scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. We could call something that I call the scope 4. It's the energy and the footprint at the end, very end of the value chain when people watch content, watch ads. How can we help end users? How can we help people to have more greener behaviors and to use greener products? Okay, content. You see the picture of Albert, the logo of Albert. You see the picture of Beat the Champions. Who know what Albert is? Cool, great. For those who don't know, Albert is a tool coming from the UK, which is now one of the main standards in the industry that enable broadcasters and producers to measure CO2 emissions during a production pipeline, to collect all the data in a nice way, and to steer on it to define action plan to reduce CO2 emissions and to, looking at time, and then you can get a certification. In January 2022, very recently, we got our first green production labeled. 2021 was the year when we created awareness. We discussed with our buyers, content acquisition team. We discussed with Fremantle, which is also part of our group, with ITV Studios, who produced this show for us, with Banijay. So it was the year to create awareness, start engaging with the industry. And January this year, we had finally our first green show. This morning, I just got the news that we got our second green label, so that's really, really cool. So how it works, you see that the first step with Albert is to measure emissions at very granular level per production to collect all the relevant data. How many trucks do you use? How many commutes, kilometers? How many accommodation nights do you need? How many lunches, dinners? What kind of food people eat, etc. What kind of energy, obviously, is used in the studio. Based on all those data, you got what we call a draft. First, estimation of the footprint. Based on this estimation, we can define an action plan. What can we do to reduce it by between 30 and 50%? Having more digital meetings, using more electric vehicles, reusing materials, stuff like this. It's sometimes obvious and common sense. That's also a good learning. And you see what we did with Beat the Champion in January, and we reduced from the draft to the actual end result with the production to a reduction of 45% of the CO2 emissions, and we received this green certification. Our goal now that we are more and more doing those green production, so we have two, the goal is to have more and more in 2022 and definitely more and more by 2025, and to have all productions monitored with Albert. I can tell you that, for example, in Germany, RTL Germany is asking, it's mandatory for all the production that they buy, they must be monitored by one specific calculator. It's not Albert, it's another one, but it's mandatory. We are not there yet, it's not mandatory, but we are pushing our partners to use it. And we want very soon to showcase this label. Not sure if it will be the Albert logo, but we are thinking of creating a label saying it's a green production, it's a production which is good for the environment, that we can showcase on screen for our viewers to engage, show them what we are doing. And definitely we want to engage with you, with the industry, with other broadcasters to see what can be done together if you want to reuse also this logo. So the story and the message will be simple for the end users, and there will be only one logo seen on screen.
You get compensated as well, eh?
Not yet. No, because we don't want to. We reduced now by 45% in that case, so it's a huge work. We could invest in carbon compensation credits via Albert or via our own program, but I think we want to wait a bit to see how it goes. And there is always the risk of greenwashing when you do the carbon offsetting. So we want to wait a bit, decrease, learn a lot with all the production company we work with, how to reduce it. And then maybe we will compensate, but not in 2022 for sure.
Because of the time.
Yes, sorry.
You have to end it.
Yeah.
But if you want to ask him questions or discuss things with him, you can do it by the lunch.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.